Now, one of Russia's main proxies operating on African soil is the private military company, the Wagner Group. So far, it's known that its mercenaries are active in at least 4 African countries. That will be Sudan, the Central African Republic, Mali and Libya. Wagner mainly provides security and military assistance to these countries. In return, they gain access to high-value materials such as gold and diamonds. Wagner soldiers stand accused of committing atrocities, including torture, kidnappings and mass rape. My next guest has been studying Wagner's activities in Africa for years. Pauline Bax is Deputy Director for the Africa Program at International Crisis Group. It's good to have you on the program, Pauline. Welcome to DW News Africa. How has the Wagner Group managed to get into the countries where it has a presence?
Well, it has been invited by the countries where it is. It has been invited by the either heads of state or military leaders that are running the country, which is the case for Libya, Sudan, Central African Republic and Mali.
And what is the group's record in the countries that it's operating in, the countries you've just listed? Is its presence in those countries helping?
We could probably say that Wagner has been most successful in Central African Republic because it has sort of spread a large network of economic interests, political influencing, media influencing, as well as security assistance. And that security assistance was training the army, as well as fighting rebel groups in the hinterland of the country. So that whole package has been very successful. And this model the group tried to replicate this model to some extent in Mali, but it hasn't been able to do that so far because the Malian leadership is firmly in control of its own political and military strategy, and Wagner mainly serves as a security provider to the national army.
As we heard in our report, Pauline, Wagner fighters have been accused of committing atrocities. How is Wagner perceived by people in the African countries where it is active?
Yeah, unfortunately, Wagner has committed quite a few atrocities, both in Central African Republic and in Mali. This involves targeting of civilians. It involves summary executions. It has put boots on the ground, so it's combating insurgencies. In both Central African Republic and Mali, it's kind of hard to assess what people who come directly into contact with Wagner combat troops feel about it, feel about their presence and how they assess it. So we've heard in Mali that people have turned against Wagner to some extent in areas where it's operating on the ground, whereas in the capital Bamako, people are still quite positive about the Wagner influence because they don't see or suffer the atrocities directly. Central African Republic is a different case because Wagner has been very successful in rolling out a propaganda campaign. It owns a radio station where a lot of pro-Russian narratives are being distributed, and in the capital there seems to be quite a lot of support for Wagner, which is seen as Russia basically, or these two are interchangeable, if you will, whereas we have very little access to people on the countryside who have been a victim of Wagner abuses. So it's a very mixed picture. It's not clear-cut.
And can you tell us a little bit more about Wagner's commercial interests in Africa? Do we know how extensive the group's business empire on the continent actually is?
Well, its main focus seems to be gold mining because gold is easy to smuggle out and very valuable, obviously. It's involved in logging, especially Central African Republic, and it has encroached on specific small sectors of the economy as well. So security, so more private security rather than military security. So it does a whole range of things in different countries. Sudan is really mainly gold mining. It has successfully, it is in the gold processing business. And we can't really say that these revenues all go to Russia or anything like that, but Wagner is kind of a self-financing group. So it comes in, it offers certain services, if you will, and it needs to generate revenue to pay back or to pay some of its troops and to pay for some of its operations there. So for the Kremlin, which is tied to, it's a fairly low-cost operation generally.
So why then is having Wagner in Africa useful for the Kremlin?
It's been a fantastic tool to project Russian influence and Russian power, and to project Russia as a valid and equitable partner for some African countries. Again, Central African Republic has been its most successful model, where it's really sort of Russia is now Central African Republic's main friend. It's not really quite the case in Mali, but it's even though the number of troops, the number of Wagner troops on the ground is not enormous, the sense that Russia is projecting its influence all across the region is actually quite huge, because Wagner is also the person sometimes, or the group that you don't see. So it's sort of the Wagner shadow that's now seen in West Africa and Central Africa.
And finally, the Wagner leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, he staged a very short-lived rebellion and march on Moscow. Do we know what difference that will make to Wagner's operations in Africa?
Well, he himself has said that it won't make any difference. The Russian foreign minister has said that Wagner operations in Africa will continue. It will be business as usual. And some of the African leaders have also said that nothing really will change. We even see in Central African Republic that the number of Wagner troops has actually increased rather than decreased. So we expect that things will basically continue, because its presence is very useful for the Kremlin. It's a different setup than the Wagner presence in Ukraine.
Pauline Bax from the International Crisis Group, we appreciate your insights on the program. Thank you.